I think it was a collection of the individuals that were involved in many of the problems of the co-ops at that time in the early days. We were having problems with legislative activities, trying to do it on a piecemeal basis and no real central leadership. And I think the fact that we needed to focus our attention on the issues of the legislature primarily brought us together as a state association.
In terms of what was being done at the state association, what other statewide, in your opinion, J.K., in the early days, say of the early 50s, were considered, in your opinion, as national leaders?
Wisconsin was one of them at the time, and Arkansas probably were the two that were very active at that time.
Wisconsin's always been a strong cooperative state.
Very much so.
Very much so. They were prominent in there.
Yeah, they had a big merchandising program at that time.
Why was Louisville selected as the headquarters city? Just because you think it was more central?
Central location. Travel facilities, that sort of thing.
One of the things you see popping up off and on is the composition of the statewide board of directors. In some states, the co-op managers are not on the statewide boards. They have the directors on it, but not the managers of the systems. The same is true with some GMPs. It's been my own observation over the years that having a director representative and a manager representative from a local co-op is really a healthy thing. Was that ever given much discussion in the state association?
Quite a bit of discussion at the time we were setting up the association. In some states, only the individual board members are on the boards, no manager. The manager comes along, but he doesn't make the decisions at the board meetings. The board member makes them. I've always had the same feeling here that the manager is just as equal as the director on board. The director brings in the local level philosophy and making of the decisions, and the manager helps carry them out. And if the manager is not involved in making a decision, he's not going to be too involved in carrying it out when he gets back home. And I think that's why you need both on the board.
Well, it certainly worked well with us. When we were first established, did all cooperatives join the state association?
No, not at all. There was only about 23 or 4 started out with the association when we started. And it was pretty much a political situation. We started out with the magazine at the same time we had the dues, and you had to take the magazine, if you remember, which was controversial and cost a lot of money. And we thought the magazine was necessary if we were going to have a legislative program in order to get the message out to the members of the co-ops in a unified form. So therefore we put the requirement together that they had to be a member and also take the magazine. And that precluded some co-ops making the decision to join.
How many co-ops were here at that time? 28 or 9?
26, I think.
26. Of those that were in on the membership at the origin, did any leave after a few years?
I think we may have had 1 or 2 to drop out and come back.
But they were relatively few.
Yeah, very few, very few.
What was the essential reason, do you think? Was it money for those 1 or 2? Or?
Money, not seeing the value. And starting the material program right after we opened up to it in 1948 as a operating organization, that was somewhat controversial with some of the managers.
Yeah.
And that had some influence on their memberships as well.
Did they see it as being too scattered as far as our objective was concerned?
Well, it was just the fact that some of them may have been aligned too closely with material suppliers as part of the problem. We started out the association on a erroneous concept. We borrowed 60 cents a member from the co-ops to start the association, and we were going to pay it back through the operation of the material program. And at that time, REA was pretty dominant in the affairs of the co-ops and how they operated. And they were saying that if we did that way in operating our association, from the profits from the buying of materials, selling materials to the co-ops, that they indirectly was financing the association. And they turned thumbs down on it. So we had to reorganize after we actually got started in 1948. Had to go back and change our whole concept and make the membership separate from the material program and set up two organizations.
Or to make it self-sustaining?
That's right. The memberships had to carry itself, and the material program had to be self-sustaining. I recall we had a lot of meetings with REA personnel at the top management level, the REA, over that very issue.
Some statewide base the membership on co-op sales of electricity, how many megawatts you sell, others on number of consumer owners, that sort of thing. Mm-hmm. Ours currently is based exclusively on the number of consumers they serve. You remember how the dues formula was based when you set it up?
No, it was based on it per member, as I recall. And how we arrived at it, I think we just made up a budget and took the number of members that the co-ops were serving and divided it out on a per member basis.
Well, that's the way it still is. And
I'm not sure that it's still a pretty good system.
Yeah. We've never put a cap on it, and a lot of statewide have.
Yeah.
Once you put a cap on it, you kind of seal off your growth.
You don't need a cap if you do it by member basis.
That's right. So we have never done that. What was the reaction of the investor-owned utilities to the cooperatives establishing their own state association? Did they pay much attention to it?
I don't recall them paying much attention to it at the time. We had a lot of problems with the IOUs at the time. Mostly it was legislature. Mostly it was over questions of establishing the G&T, East Kentucky. That was another reason we started the association. We figured we were going to have a battle royal over the Public Service Commission approval on their getting a certificate to operate. And that was one of the bases of establishing the association at the time. And most of our arguments with the utilities were in the legislature or at the Public Service Commission.
Yeah. The notion of the territorial law took root, of course, somewhat later on, and I reckon became an eventuality in around 72. When did the taproot of discussion start relative to the potential need for a territorial law?
I think it started in the late 60s. It became evident that we were going to have a problem, particularly on loads where they're on a borderline. And they were pretty adamant about retaining their position on that. And I think we were having a little problem with some of the cities at the time as well, expanding our city limits, taking in some of the co-op areas that were right up adjacent to existing city limits. So territorial protection was a paramount issue because that had security with the co-op. And if we couldn't solidify that territory, they were not going to be bona fide borrowers with the federal government because of the inability to serve those loads as they develop.
I have forgotten, I know this is just to state my memory, roughly what year did we go under the commission regulation?
We were, I think, always under the commission regulations, as I recall.
It goes back at least to the 50s.
I think we were always under the commission regulation, and we finally got legislation certifying that we would remain under the commission. We were debated many times in state association meetings whether or not we wanted to get legislation to take us out, and we decided it was better to stay under. That was a good protection, and that it was we handled our PR properly. That it would be a good thing for us from the standpoint of the members and the public. Now, a lot of states, got legislation to get out from under commission.
13.
Yeah, I'm not sure that was good.
Yeah, currently 13 across the nation remain under what we refer to as full regulation.
Yeah.
The territory, the rates, the service standards, and so forth and so on. Kentucky obviously is one of those 13. We've got right now, J.K., a pretty strong group.
I think it's good PR. I think it's a good thing. It makes you be a better citizen. It makes you operate better. You operate your business on a better basis by being on the commission. You have somebody looking over your shoulder a little bit. And I think it's just good policy.
I remember J.R. Miller, when he first went down to Green River at Owensboro, he told me this personally. He went there on an assignment from REA to clean it up.
Right.
And he said, Ron, I never saw a co-op in such a state of disarray. He
Yeah.
said, I saw instance after instance where the directors themselves on the board had taken member deposits and put it in their own pockets.
Right.
I saw fraud. I saw mismanagement. I saw illegality involved, et cetera, et cetera. And he said that's one of the reasons that I became among those very strongly in favor of commission.
Yeah, I think it creates better management by being on the commission, because you got somebody that you have to report to and that can call you to task when you're not doing your job right. I think from a member's point of view, it's good.
What was the reaction, if any, of the investor-owned utilities when we first got into transformer repair?
We got into transformer repair by accident. We started out in the transformer business by doing repair business only. And then when we got to making what we call the units that go in the transformer, the coils, we said, well, why don't we take this a little step farther? We were trying to buy transformers for resale. As a wholesaler, we were dealing with Maloney Electric Company at the time. And Maloney was doing quite a bit of business with the utilities. And at the time, they refused to sell us transformers with a discount, so we could redistribute them as a wholesaler. And they had a salesman by the name of Gray that came to the board meeting here one time, statewide board meeting, and told the board that they were going to have to drop us from the standpoint of selling us transformers to the statewide so we could resell them to the co-ops, because the utilities were putting pressure on them. And he made that statement to our board of directors. Well, that gave us every bit of the grounds we needed for going into the manufacturing business. From then on, we said, well, we're going to have to manufacture transformers if we're going to sell them. So we went into the business.
I was reading just the other day an excerpt from the minutes. Wasn't minutes, it was a departmental report. Clyde Denton might have been involved in the wording. I believe it said that when we got involved in the manufacturing of transformers, that overnight on the open market, transformer prices went down 43 or 47%.
They went down. I don't remember the percentage, but they did go down. Yeah.
It's understandable.
Yeah, it was, that was what was the basis for our whole manufacturing and material program. Yeah.
Not to the state association, but to United Utility Supply as a separate entity being multi-state. Was there much reaction then of the investor-owned?
Not much different at all. And you know, the reason we set up a utility supply business separate from the statewide association was when we decided to expand it out of Kentucky.
Right. What was the reaction of other states within our marketing region to the establishment of UUS as an entity?
Some states accepted it fairly easily, some didn't. We recognized it was going to be a problem because in time, a good salesman has good relationships with the buyers. And it takes a while to weave your way in to kind of bite off a little of that relationship. And we were able to do that in several states, Indiana, Ohio, begin with, as I recall. And as the graduate in Georgia, we had an arrangement with Georgia where we supplied an organization set up by the co-ops in Georgia. We kind of wholesale to them, and they resale to the co-ops. And the same thing's in Ohio. But it works.
After the state association had been in business for 2 or 3 years, was there ever that time, J.K., when you looked in your mirror when you were shaving one morning and second-guessed yourself as to the wisdom in setting it all up?
Not really. Really, I didn't have any better sense than to be completely satisfied with what we were doing. There were times, as I know, we'd look at the cash flow and our money requirements where we didn't know whether we were going to be able to draw our checks next month or not. It was that tight. And we had one director by the name of Elvin Langford who loaned us money, back in those early days for us to operate on until we got our credit established. And then we went to Stockyard Bank and got a line of credit there. And then we got the Bank of Co-ops and got some credit established there. And that's the basis on which we started. And that was over on Story Avenue when we were starting our manufacturing business.
Well, we've still got loan arrangements with Stockyards, and we've still got loan arrangements with Bank of Co-ops.
Yeah.
Well, loan arrangements with Bank of Co-ops, Stockyards just our checking
That's
accounts
right,
and normal banking services and that sort of thing.
That's been a long established relationship.
Yeah.
They loaned us money when we were not really credit worthy.
Yeah, and that doesn't surprise me.
That's right. That's right.
Now, Stockyards, they have really done an excellent job in their management structure. They are, yes, they have several branches.
They had a fellow who was CEO there by the name of Sanders, who was the minister.
I see.
And he loaned money to us strictly on the faith of the management of this organization. Yeah.
I've heard Don Wood say on occasion that Kentucky was really instrumental in helping other states to establish statewide activities, whether or not that was giving them advice on annual meeting coordination, whether or not that was giving them counsel later on the establishment of the statewide credit union, how to go about structuring the safety and job training departments, the manufacturing and the marketing activities, the magazine circulation, those kinds of things. During your earlier days, would you make trips into those states on request, J.K., and just give them advice on how we've gone about stuff?
We appeared on a lot of statewide programs in other states since we were kind of out front on many of these activities, merely in an advisory way, not to try to dominate what they were doing, but to give them suggestions. We were going by trial and error on a lot of our activities. Some of them were successful, some were not. But we had a pretty good established record in those areas. And many of the statewides came in after we did and hired CEOs, and they were interested in getting some information on how to go about getting established and the proper way to do it.
I'm sure that Kentucky was among the larger of the statewide.
Was. Where was?
Was it the largest, or do you remember?
We weren't the largest in the beginning. I think Wisconsin still was the largest. And pretty soon as we got our material program established, we became the largest, I guess, and had more activities. The annual meeting organization of annual meetings, the setting up and assisting the co-ops was a real bona fide service that we provided.
Yeah.
And it had appeal to the directors, to the managers, and to the members. And that was become one of our outstanding services.
Was there any state, in your honest opinion, that approached Kentucky relative to the degree of coordination it provided?
Arkansas did. They all had almost the same program as we did, and same type of approach to it. But I don't think they continued theirs. Theirs was dropped by the wayside. But
well, most of them have, and as I was mentioning during lunch, it's interesting to me, and Dan Yates and I have talked about this from time to time. When I talk to other state associations, they're almost bewildered at the involvement our state association has in annual meetings. And I've had statewide managers tell me, well, Ron, our co-op managers tell me, they just assume that I not come, that I can spend my time more productively. And I'm thinking to myself, they've manufactured an excuse not to go.
Exactly. I think it's one of the greatest services you can provide. The directors see it, the members see it. It gives you a tie to the members at a time it's critical to them. Their annual meeting day is kind of a total up day for them. It's the day when they got to be reporting to the members on how they're operating the system and get a feedback from the members. And it's a very important, very sensitive day from the standpoint of the management of the local co-op. I think it's one of the greatest services State Association can provide.
Tell us about the origin of the bucket and bulbs.
I guess we just sort of fell into that by accident. We were looking for something that we could provide the members that would attract them to come and register and participate in annual meetings. And we hit upon this idea of a bucket of bulbs, and it went over so well that it's still in existence, I understand.
What Can you remember the origin of that notion? Was it probably a staff discussion and somebody just suggested it?
I think it came out of a staff meeting, staff discussion, yeah. And it's just an idea that popped up in somebody's mind. I don't know who really was the creator of it.
About what year might that have been?
I would think around 50, 51 maybe. Yeah. But we started in the annual meeting business right at about 49. And
So it was almost immediately.
almost immediately. Yeah.
Tell us about a co-op annual meeting in those days, J.K. I know it wasn't just a 2-hour affair.
It was entirely different because the approach was so different then because the members were new to electric service in those days, in 48 and 49. They were still learning how to use electric service. And in many of them we had demonstrations, so electric range demonstrations, various demonstrations on appliances. And we had exhibits in a lot of the co-op meetings where we get the local dealers. We'd have a representative statewide go out and contact all the local dealers. And they'd put on promotions for the annual meeting. And they'd have exhibits there, and we'd charge them for those exhibits. And we had a tent that had exhibits all up and down the aisle of the annual meeting on both sides. Maybe as many as 50 and 60 exhibits at an annual meeting. It was a big affair, a big day. And most of those annual meetings were 2-day affairs.
2 days.
Yeah.
And in terms of numbers of people?
I'd say we'd have on the average 7,500 people attending, and up to as many as 15 to 16,000. And some of them as low as 2,000, 2,500. But it was a big day and a big thing in each community. It was,
you had a lot of publicity.
Oh, yeah, a lot of publicity. We'd work with the local newspaper outlets and all the media in the local area. And it was a big activity for the association.
You would have food trailers?
Had 2 food trailers, and then had local people come in and operate the food trailers, and they'd get a percentage of the sales of the food. As I recall, they'd get maybe 50% of the benefits. And we'd provide a supervisor, 2 or 3 men. Interestingly enough, we'd go to the colleges in the summertime and wintertime and try to get personnel from the college that would operate those food trailers. And we ended up getting a guy in the dental school here at U of L one year that was in charge of the food trailers who became governor of South Carolina.
I'll be darned.
Yeah, Edwards.
Edwards.
Yeah. Yeah, he was on the food trailers. And he'll tell you today it was one of the greatest experiences he ever had. Yeah.
There was something on the annual meetings. Dennis, was there something? How's the membership?
Yeah, we didn't have any meeting facilities large enough to accommodate these size of crowds, so we owned the tents, and we had a co-op personnel helped us put the tents up. We had personnel going along with them, 3 or 4 people from here. Coordinated. We hauled them on our trucks. We had the trucks that hauled equipment, and the trailers, and all that stuff go in there. We had the tents for the exhibits, and they were about 12 foot wide, and they'd be long tents. And we had to have electrical supply to all of them to hook up all their appliances to operate them. It was a big
like
deal.
A carnival coming
It was a big carnival coming to town, except it was an annual meeting. Some of them we tied in a carnival atmosphere.
Yeah. What was the reaction of the local co-op linemen and other people who were involved in the putting up and the taking down of the tent? Were they pretty agreeable?
Very agreeable. In those days, they were very agreeable because it was all new to them. And they just took it as a part of their job to help do it in those days.
And I suppose because of what country people saw as the benefit of rural electrification, running lines through their farm and that sort of thing was virtually no problem at all?
Not at all. Not at all. Very few had to buy a right-of-way. In fact, it was a no-no to buy a right-of-way. Everybody was given their right-of-way because it was giving a service to your neighbor. You don't want to block your neighbor from getting service. Nobody ever thought of paying anybody for a right-of-way in those days. Different concept entirely. It was cooperative to cooperative.
How did the magazine begin here, or the newsletter, as whatever form?
It started out as a newspaper. It was about a 4, 5, 6-page newspaper, as I recall. And it was designed primarily to get the message of the rural electric program out to the members, to inform them on the problems that the co-ops were experiencing, legislative problems, educational activities. We had a full-time home economist on the staff here, Mary Alice Willis, as you recall, was here. She was part of the writing of the editor. Seth Thompson was our first editor. He was from Missouri, as I recall. We started that, I think, in 48 or 49.
In terms of the annual meetings in their earlier days, did the co-ops ever bring any featured outside speakers, or was it primarily always localized?
It was always localized, and they pretty much relied on us to provide the program.
Did political candidates come to meet people?
They invited political candidates to come. They wanted to come. They wanted to be. They wanted to appear there in support of the co-op.
We've got some co-ops today, Dan and Dennis will attest to this, who really kind of shy away from even inviting.
Oh, I think that's a mistake.
Yeah.
They never get a better crowd than that to talk to.
That's what you've always said, Dan.
They always had the local politicians represented to the state government, legislature, senators, state senators, state representatives, and sometimes the mayor of the town where we were meeting, county officials. Great spot for them to be. They like to be tied to the co-op.
Oh, yes, sir. Yeah. Talk with us about what the investor-owned reaction was when they first became aware of the initial proposal for a Rural Electrification Act for Kentucky.
I'm not too familiar with the reaction at that time. I think they were opposed to it.
Yeah, Happy Chandler
Was governor at the time.
Right.
Yeah.
Talked about that a little
Right.
bit and said that some of the investor owners fought it.
Right. But it didn't have much problem getting through the legislature, as I recall. But I'm not too familiar with that development.
How did you, in the earlier days, work with the co-ops in organizing them for political effectiveness? I know the magazine was a key part of that. I know hiring a person here to work with the General Assembly on legislative issues that we were interested in was a part of that. But in terms of working with the local co-ops to help them in communicating our message to their local delegation, what kind of things did we do?
We didn't have much of a unified program on that approach at the time. It was mostly kind of a come see, come what program approach, not anything unified, as I recall, at that time.
Going back to maybe the first, well, not necessarily the first, during your tenure here, your whole tenure, can you remember two or three things, J.K., that were close to slamming of the doors in the boardroom, really controversial discussions of very sensitive issues?
Well, I think the material program was one of the most sensitive issues we had started establishing it. I don't recall anything other than debates on legislative approaches, but nothing really controversial in terms of getting close to busting the organization up. I think the biggest problem we had was when we established with the wrong concept for the association of borrowing the money from the co-ops and going to pay them back from the operation of the material program. Come as close to killing it as anything we ever had. It was touch and go on that.
And that was largely because of REA?
REA's objection to using the material program to subsidize the membership.
Today, we don't have frequent contact with REA or with us now. It's RUS. But my guess is that during your time, you had pretty frequent contact.
Oh, yes, very much so. They pretty much they had the approval of the managers. The board would hire the manager. They had approval of it. That was from 1948 when we started, clear on up through early 60s. They dominated the thinking of the board. They pretty much laid out to the board how they should operate. They dictated most of the policies. It was their hand was in there pretty heavy all along.
When did that begin to change?
When CFC came into business, they had to change their whole concept when they decided to let somebody else be on the mortgage with them.
I know that you had to be thinking about the notion of CFC several years before it became an eventuality. In addition to yourself, what other handful of people were really involved in the seeds of the thought that led to CFC?
It started back at the regional meetings. Kentucky group, the Region 3 meeting, had a resolution. Kentucky introduced a resolution at a regional meeting in, I guess maybe 56 or somewhere along in there, that advocated that we begin to look at financing other than REA. And we were sort of looked upon as the outcast at the time. We were the traitors. But we were just a little bit ahead of the progress in our thinking.
And the notion that you were a traitor was based on what logic in their minds, J.K.?
That we were going to destroy the REA program as the 2% lending program, that there'd be difficult to get appropriations. And particularly that was the Western group of people, co-ops at the time. Our region, Region 3, was pretty much of the same thinking, but it wasn't enough of the same thinking to get that resolution through the regional meeting. Our national association blocked that. The legislative people blocked it. We were about 3 or 4 years ahead of our time.
Was it economics, you think, that generally gave the momentum that eventually led to other people signing off on the advisability of it?
I think the fact that we were having trouble, there was heavy demands for money at the time. Okay. And in order to get enough money to meet the demands for the loan program, brought it into being. They were not able to meet it. They were having carryovers every year. They were not able to meet the demands for the borrowing.
Well, I know that Ted Hampton told me once, we were driving along or something, he said the best advice that anybody ever gave me in my entire management life was J.K. Smith. And it was down toward the end of his time with the State Association. He said, Ted, get all the 2% money that you can get, right. Put your system in as strong operational position as you can, because it's not going to be there for much longer.
That's right. I could see that coming. Yeah, everybody could see that coming.
Who initially approached you relative to the potential of becoming governor of CFC?
The organizational group, the Long Range Study Committee. I was chairman of that committee, and had gone around the country helping sell the program, helping devise it with the work of the other members of the committee. And at the time that we got it approved in 1969 at Atlantic City, when the National Rural Electric Membership approved it, after that we had incorporated the organization, and I was supposed to become governor.
Did they simply approach you and say, we'd like for you to do this?
Right.
What was your initial reaction to that?
My first reaction was that they ought to look somewhere else. I liked it here in Kentucky. Big move. I had faith that it would be successful. There was a lot of questions. We had to get a IRS approval on the handling of the funds, that it'd be exempt. It was a big question. If that hadn't gone through, we'd never made it. We had to get REA's approval to let us in on the mortgage with the existing loans to be equally sharing. Those are two big questions. If we had not had Dave Hamill as administrator at the time, our CFC would have never made it. But he could see the daylight coming through the approach of the supplemental financing.
I know that he always valued, too, your judgment, too.
Yes, we were very good friends. Yeah.
The notion of CFC, you then made the decision to move on to CFC. In terms of setting up the foundation of it, J.K., hiring the people and so forth, just kind of briefly walk through that process.
Well, we had no pattern to go by whatsoever at all.
By the way, before you get into that, and I'll come back to that, what flashed out of my mind, the name rural in CFC's name. I've always heard that you emphasized to the people that having the name rural was important. Talk to us about that.
The name was a debated issue on many meetings we had. We had a lot of informal meetings of the groups that were forming the CFC. Several of us felt the name rural would have a connotation of approval, different from anything else, that it should be in the name, that we were furnishing money to the rural areas of the country. We were thinking in terms of selling this idea to the money market people, bond buyers, and each name in the name of CFC has a meaning. It had to be financed. It had to be a cooperative. So those three words had to automatically be in their name. So we finally hit upon the name National Rural Electric Utilities Cooperative. That's the way we decided.
And by the name rural being in there, at least what I have heard from history, the people on Wall Street saw that as something that was not flashy.
That's right.
Solid.
They had a good feeling about people in the rural areas of the country being good business people. When we had meetings with them, we had what we call a dog and pony show going around the country to meet with investors. We emphasized the rural, the nature of each one had a separate board of directors, separate management. Each one made their own decisions. They were good business people. They were made up of boards of directors. There were farmers, there were lawyers, there were accountants, whatever the co-op members might supply them, that they were solid. They paid their bills, and they even read their own meters. And that had a very good connotation.
Now talk with us, going back to the question I had posed about how you formulated in your own mind the structure of CFC, how you would begin first with your notion of just hiring the right people and staffing it and that kind of thing.
Very difficult job, very difficult job. There was only one or two of us that was there at the time, and we had to go by the mortgage requirements. That's the kind of staffing we'd had to have. The people on Wall Street, Kuhn Loeb, Jerry Katzen at the time, pretty much had an outline of what we needed in terms of solidifying the mortgage. The mortgages, the common mortgages that we'd be supplying and borrowing money on. And we had to have a loan officer. We knew that. We had to have an engineer, somebody that could interpret the co-op's programs. And we had to have a good member relations man. So those were the staff people that we immediately saw. We had to have internal people, administrative people, and each just kind of fell into space, but fell into slot. And then we started looking for people to fill those slots. And we got as our first loan officer, our assessor from NRECA, who was with us in the development of CFC. He knew the background of the co-ops, knew the co-op people, and he just fit in perfectly.
Was Clyde Denton the only one who came from Kentucky
He was the only one,
operations?
yeah.
He was in member relations, member services.
And he knew the co-op program.
Yeah.
He knew how to write the news releases. He knew the program and knew the types of members we were dealing with. Just fit perfect.
I guess that of that central group, that to a person, they just became part of the initial glue.
That's right. That's right. Yeah. And that pattern still exists.
Yeah. I've noticed over the years it's changed very little.
30 years. 30 years.
Yeah. So forth and so on.
And we had to have good legal people. We got one of the lawyers out of REA who had retired from REA, Lou Rowland, who was a good REA lawyer. And he knew what the mortgages were. He knew how to write the mortgages. And it just fit in perfect.
I know that you had always been involved pretty much in the affairs of REA and mutual involvement with the other statewide associations. To what extent during those days was Kentucky involved with NRECA itself as the national association? Was that relationship a little strained on occasion, or were we actively involved with them on about everything?
It was a good relationship, but somewhat strange as well, because we were the initiation group of the supplemental financing program. And being in charge of the long-range study committee, there was a feeling at NRESDA, particularly at the staff level, that if we created a financing organization, it ought to become an arm of NRECA. And there were many of us on the NRECA long study committee felt that would not work, that you couldn't mix borrowing with politics, legislation. It ought to be separate. Management ought to be separate. And a lot of people felt that there would always be friction there and it would be a problem. But we felt strong enough that it ought to be separate. And the people on Wall Street advised us to keep it separate too. And that's how it come to be a separate organization.
So I think it's probably safe to say that many of those other states, particularly states that were out there in the West, the Northwest, the Dakotas, and that kind of thing, they probably saw Kentucky as undermining the national program as it was known at that time through REA.
were saying we were going to destroy the REA program from the standpoint of being able to borrow money at a low rate of interest. That we kept emphasizing it's supplemental, and that you would not be able to have enough money to support your needs on into the future. That we would not be able to get enough money appropriated for the co-op's needs. And particularly, they were very behind then on the G&Ts, meeting the demands of the transmission co-op. And but a lot of them were dead set against us at the time.
Was there ever a time, J.K., when you started to retreat, or did you from day one say this is what we need to do and never retreat?
I took the position, a positive approach, that we have to do it. And once we got enough systems involved to commit the money, the big deal was getting the co-ops to appropriate the money. You know, after we got it incorporated, the next big step was to get the co-ops to loan the money to CFC at 3% interest for 50 years.
Yeah.
That's a big undertaking. Many of those directors sitting there would not be there when that money is going to be coming
due.
due.
Amounted to how much money for a typical co-op in Kentucky?
Oh, it was several $100,000.
Yeah.
Yeah. In a formula, that's what I call the formula now, but it was a lot of money. And that was the seed money to start it, CFC. And had to have it. Yeah. And it had to be secondary to our loans on Wall Street. It was mortgage money.
Did you meet with local boards on that yourself or not?
Some we did, but mostly the managers were able to carry the ball. We equipped them with the information, and they were able to get it through. And pretty soon we had 60%. We said when we got 60%, we were going to go. And when we got 60% of the co-ops in the country to do it, we said we were in business. And the first loan was made in Kentucky at Warren Electric in 1972. Made at a national meeting.
Did you ever have people from other states come to you privately on visits and try to talk you out of it?
Not really. Not really. I think they were too convinced that I was too set on doing it. Not really.
Just didn't want to mess with you.
Now, we had several states that were, through their associations, were opposed to it.
Yeah.
In the Dakotas.
Very much so.
Yeah.
A lot of different philosophies, J.K., on a cooperative hiring its own CEO. I have seen situations here, and I waver on this from time to time, where you have got an outstanding internal candidate who, no question, can be an excellent manager. In those kinds of instances, is your personal persuasion that it's still healthy to the process to open up the search and do a broad-based search, or do you think when a local co-op has got that person that they know is about 90% of what they're going to need, just to go ahead and hire the person, or do you think that's a decision that's such a close call from time to time, each board just ought to do what each board thinks is the right thing to do?
I think each board ought to do what they think is the right thing to do. If they're set on an individual, they've seen the individual perform, and they're going to hire him anyway.
Don't go through the process.
I go through the process.
It's a false
Right,
process.
right. But if it's a borderline case, then I think they ought to open it up.
In your case, looking back at your experience at the State Association, at CFC, even Fleming-Mason, when you were hiring a person who directly reported to J.K. Smith, tell us the essential qualities that you really look for, other than having the ability to do the job that they were hired to do.
Background. Does he come from a rural area? Did he grow up on a farm? Or did he have to work for what he accomplished? What his philosophies are? Those are the things that I would look for. And the compatibility to the organization, as well as his normal abilities.
And occasionally, I reckon you'd make a hiring decision that you thought was right at the time, and as it turned out, went sour.
Some of them did. Some of them did. Some of them didn't work out.
When you found the ones that didn't work out, J.K., did you try to sit down with the individual and resolve it for a period of time? How did you deal with those?
Well, you detect it long before you had to terminate them. And you start counseling with them and working with them. And finally, you just keep applying the pressure, and usually they quit rather than have to terminate them. But sometimes you get to the point that you have to terminate them. But you detect the problem way before you get there.
if you had to do your state association career all over again, would there be any significant changes you think you'd make in the way that you went about starting your career here at the state association?
I don't think so. I don't think so. I got out of school. My brother was attorney for the co-op at Meade County, and I was working in the summertime with a contractor there, and got familiar with the program a little bit. Got informed, acquainted with the engineering firm, Ray Chanterbury. This was in '37. And he was also the engineering firm for Fleming-Mason Rail Electric. And he began to tell us that there was going to be a manager's job open up at Fleming-Mason. Superintendent, they called him in those days. And they had $200,000 loan coming for 600 miles of line. So he wanted to know if I'd be interested. And I said, well, sure, I'm very interested. I didn't have a job. I got married in '38, making $18 a week, and didn't even worry about that. So my brother and myself went up there to appear before the board. It was a 7-member board, 1 lady and 6 male men. And I think there were 9 applicants. And I'll always say that board was crazy to hire me because I didn't know nothing about what I was going to do. I was 21 years of age, no management experience at all, and yet they hired me to manage that, run that co-op. Started.
And if my memory is correct from the tape, at the time, that was the youngest co-op manager in the United States?
All right. Marvin McIntyre was the attorney for the co-op at the time, and REA didn't want to prove me as the superintendent. They had to prove it, said I was too young, no experience. And he went to Washington and pleaded on my behalf, and he said, well, we'll try him.
You didn't go with him?
No.
He went by himself?
Went by himself, yeah. They didn't have enough money to send me to Washington. All they had was membership money. It was their own.
In terms of thinking back when you were here for those 20 years or so, what governors stand out in your mind as being the most cooperative?
Lawrence Weatherby. Combs was pretty cooperative, but Lawrence Weatherby was outstanding.
In what set him apart?
Well, he was in tune with the co-op program. He had a philosophy that sort of matched our efforts and was conducive to going along with us on the things that we needed at the time. And Earl Clemens at the time was U.S. representative, and he never was too strong with us. We always felt the utilities had him in their pocket.
And I think that's right. Those that you found most frustrating to work with, or the people in Frankfort found it most frustrating to work with in terms of governors?
I don't know that I would say that any of them were anti, but I recall Lawrence Weatherby was just very outstanding with us.
You mentioned during lunch your thoughts about PSC regulation. Still, the merits of it, both to the management and the members. Talk with us a little bit about your own philosophy of why you individually think that PSC regulation perhaps is still a healthy thing.
There was quite a bit of discussion on that in the early days of the program. When we set up the association, there were many in the program that figured one of the first things we ought to do is get out and run the Public Service Commission, because they were going to be in our way in getting everything we wanted, particularly the Generation Transmission Co-op, East Kentucky. We knew that was going to be a big battle to get by the Public Service Commission. And that was the crux of the whole argument. And as time went along, we decided that the majority of us that it was better stay under the commission to do our job of PR, to do the things that we needed to do correctly, that we'd have better management, we'd have better defense of the activities of the co-ops, somebody to have a place to go to appeal to a group that's outside the program if they had a problem, and that if we did our PR work right, we could so go ahead with our program, and we did. So that was the basis of our thinking.
And I suppose that with the passage of time, you've seen not too much that would persuade you that you were wrong.
I still say the same thing today. I think it's still good. It just gives the co-ops a good defensive position from the standpoint of PR relations with the members. And it creates, I think, situation where they got to have good management. At least it gives them incentive to have good management.
I've always really honored your own approach to retirement, J.K. You worked a long time, but it looked like to me when you left the job, you left the job. You didn't run back and try to operate quietly from telephone somewhere and counsel this person on what to do and that person how to do. I remember interviewing John Sherman Cooper along with our statewide editor just after he had left the United States Senate. And there's one comment that Senator Cooper made that always has stayed with me, and it was this: when you leave a job, you leave a job.
That's right.
He said, I never have walked back on the Senate floor. I'll go into the cloakroom, and I'll call out people from time to time if I want to see them. But when you leave a job, you leave a job. Talk with us a little bit about just general counsel to people as they approach and as they enter into retirement.
Well, I think you've got to make up your mind when you're going to retire and have a plan of what you're going to do. But when you leave because you can't keep your finger in the pie and try to tell somebody else how to do it. You've got to cut your ties, leave that individual who takes your place the opportunity to operate, put their own philosophies and programs into force. And if you're around, you're going to be in their way. People are going to come to you with rumors and problems they're having with the management, try to get you to take sides or take their side, and that's not good. And I think out of all the respect for the person who takes your place, you've got to stay out of the way.
And talk with us. I know you've talked with me from time to time about your belief it's important for the person to have a hobby.
Oh, yes, when you retire, you got to have something to do. You got to have a hobby, or you'll end up in trouble some way. I see so many people. I've been retired now since 1979 in October, and I've enjoyed every year of it. And I see in my association with people, other people that are retired, some of them are not enjoying life. They don't have a hobby. And I'll give you a good example in our own program over here that you know that can't retire is Bob Cabot.
Absolutely.
He's still working. Even though he's retired from NRCA, he's still working. And his wife told my wife at the April 30th meeting the other day he flunked retirement.
And she was exactly right.
She's exactly right. Yeah, I just think you got to have a hobby. You got to have something else that gives you a choice, a challenge, something to do. I played a lot of golf. I flew with the stock market. When I retired, I had a certain number of assets, and I cashed in my retirement program with NRCA, and I still have over half that left.
Well, I always knew you're on minimum wage, and now I'm just firmly convinced you're on minimum wage. You've also emphasized preparing for that potential eventuality when you can't make your own decisions. That you prepare for yourself financially,
right.
That you prepare for yourself otherwise, and you've told me on occasion most people wait until it's too late.
They wait until they got an emergency, and somebody else has to do the planning for them, which is bad. Marge and I, my wife, retired from our independent living in 2001, and we moved into a retirement area in Mount Dora, Florida. We had been living in Apopka on a golf course, and she developed macular degeneration of her eyesight, and her vision's bad. She can't drive anymore. And we both reached the decision that we had to do something to provide her for her living conditions if something happened to me. And so we got to looking around. We found this retirement area that we moved to that has nursing assistance, has assisted living facilities, has the meals there. If you get a spot on your carpet, they'll come in and clean it for you. All the services you need. They'll take you to the doctor. They'll take you to church. All those services are provided. And I think everyone has to think about what they're going to do when they get to the point they can't take care of themselves. That's what we did in our planning.
And I think maybe there's two more questions. Our member services, Enrons of the world.
That's helped a lot. That's helped a lot. Utilities right now are in bad shape, most of them. I read in Wall Street Journal all the time about the problems they're having. Some of them are having financial difficulty. There's a lot of mergers going on because of financial difficulties. I predict the utility is going to end up like the banks. There'll only be 3 or 4 big ones in the country because the others can't make it. They can't do the financing. You see very little generation of being built by distribution utilities anymore. It's either big wholesalers because the rate structure is such that when they put in a power plant, they get hit with a high rate. They can't stand the pressure on rates competitive. And I think that the utility business is going to change drastically.
And conversely, by cooperatives being member-owned, by being local, by being part of the community, I suspect that your prognosis for the cooperatives will be quite different than it is for the investor-owners.
Exactly. I think the cooperatives need to stay as close to the members as they can stay. And the idea that they're owned by those they serve is the greatest concept there is. If they just keep their annual meetings going and provide an opportunity for the members to be involved in activities, provide essential services. I get a little worried when they branch out into services that are not related entirely. Unfortunately, I don't think we have the kind of management in most co-ops that can diversify and manage the different activities that the co-ops get involved in. We had one in Denton, Texas, it went bankrupt for that very reason.
Very costly.
Very costly. Cost CFC some money, cost the co-op some money. And I think they branched out too fast, and not enough of them are able to handle it. And I think that the members of the co-ops get hurt when that happens.
I talked with you a little during lunch. Dan has seen this. Dennis sees it all the time. A manager comes to his local co-op annual meeting. A board of directors come. And sometimes the board will have a board meeting that will run JK till 5 minutes until 5 or 7 in the afternoon. They'll come out of their board meeting and kind of parade in to the annual meeting stage. They'll mix with the members.
Yeah.
We have others where the manager, his board, and a few key staff will leave right after the business meeting and go off to a dinner off-site and won't stay with your members, won't stay with their membership. What is your own personal philosophy about the importance of a manager and a board mixing with the members before and during all of the annual meetings?
Oh, absolutely necessary. Absolutely necessary. Now, members are watching that. They see that, and they react to it. The co-op that has a good relationship with members is one that mixes with the members, works with the members, is known by the members, is available to the members, and got good service. Good service and good rates are the two things, and good relationships are the things going to make them successful. When they have an annual meeting, that's the one time that they ought to really have their first face on. And they ought to be out there mixing with the members and meeting them, talking to them, and being with them until they leave.
And lastly, what are your sort of concluding thoughts to the employees here with the State Association, with United Utility Supply, with the Rural Cooperatives Credit Union about the service that we continue to provide?
Well, I think it's great. I think it's great. The fact that you've been in service so long, you're successful, you've got a reputation, it's good. The employees here ought to be very happy with the organization. You're doing well, you're doing a good service, you have a good relationship with the members. The thing that I like about the association versus when I was here, you got all of them as members. And we couldn't accomplish that.
I know when, I believe it was West Kentucky was the final one that joined up, and I put an article in Update. JK sent me a handwritten note and said, I never thought I'd see the day when all of them would come in.
That's right. That speaks very well for the service you're giving. Speaks well for the management, leadership.
Well, on camera, JK, I want to thank you for a lifetime of sacrifice or service. I know that you had a lot of fun, but I know you had a lot of frustrating.
I enjoyed every bit of it. Enjoyed every bit of it.
There were times where you were worried not about the dollars, you were worried about the pennies.
Right.
And it's interesting to talk to some of the people who were here when you were here, because the thoughts of those people getting overtime, JK, was as far from their minds as these was from north to west. And I mean, I'm talking about people who were here at 7 o'clock in the morning midnight and be back in here again at 7 or 8 o'clock.
Many a night we come in at midnight from annual meeting. We always drive. We always made it our business to be there, and we always had several members of the State Association staff at the annual meeting. We thought that was a key service that we could provide to be related with the co-op at that particular sensitive time of their history.
Well, I know one of the funnier stories that I ever heard was told me by B.B. King. She said, we went somewhere up in the mountains, and B.B., you know B.B., she said it was hotter than hell. And she said, J.K. asked the staff member in the car a question, and the staff member gone to sleep. She said, J.K. said, is that damn guy asleep? B.B. said, yeah, I said, he's asleep. And she said, well, J.K. said, we're going to burn him out. So she said, he turns the heater on full force, and she said, yeah, it's hotter than hell inside this car. J.K. said, and don't roll the windows down, baby. He's going right up. And she said, we went for miles, and he slept like a baby. And she said, I got by. My panties were drenched, and my clothes were drenched, and my face was drenched. And J.K. finally said, roll the daggone windows down. He said he's never going to wake up.
Yeah.
It was things like that. I think it just added a lot of spirit.
Oh, we had a lot of fun.
Yeah.
A lot of fun. Yeah.
Dan, any...
did you feel that the cooperative program, through its grassroots organization, realized and used the political clout they had to its potential?
I don't think they did. I don't think they realized how much political clout they got.
Still true.
And they, if they solidly organized and really focused on an issue, they've got tremendous political clout if they stick together. That's all they got to do is stick together. They've got the greatest force in the world. Nobody can beat them.
And legal issues aside, at your time, did you feel that the municipal systems and the cooperatives were really missing out in not joining forces as consumer-owned?
That's right. That's right. There were always a little friction between the two because we were up adjacent to what was rural areas at the time, and the cities expanded out, and they wanted to take those over. That created friction. And we never was able to get together and a unified approach then on any issue for that reason. And I think maybe it was some of it is our own mistakes, too, not working that angle.
It's almost an unbeatable combination.
It absolutely would be. It absolutely would be. The whole state would be municipal if they ever did that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Just to show you the lack of political sensitivity, we had a manager here a couple, 3 weeks ago. On the stage has got a United States Senator who gets there late, but gets there because he just gotten out of the Senate, who is going to be voting in 2 weeks on the National Energy Bill, who is a member of the Energy Committee in the United States Senate. And as I was going up to speak to the membership, I turned around to the manager and I said, you going to let the senator say a few comments? And he says, no, we're running a little short time.
Oh, my Lord. Gee, that's awful. That's awful.
It ruined my whole
that's awful.
It ruined my whole week.
That's just not understanding the situation.
Oh, God almighty. And
Oh,
managers like that, J.K., can be excellent as far as managing the cooperative. But it seems like their mind just stops.
He's oblivious to the other problems.
Yeah.
Oh, Lord, he missed an opportunity there. It was great.
Dennis, what about you?
I jotted down a few things, Mr. Smith. The first one I'd like to ask is how much are you keeping up with Touchstone Energy?
I see the ads. I'm proud of them. They're good ads, but I don't really know much about the philosophy behind it. I wonder why more co-ops are not members of it.
Well, that's what I wanted to ask is your opinion of that type of action.
It's very good. Very good. You're reaching people that don't know anything about co-ops at all. But you'd be surprised, people that don't understand co-ops, if you can get a guy and set him down and give him 5 minutes, you can convince him it's a good thing.
And here in Kentucky, see, when we got into it, East Kentucky paid the bill for all of their member systems. That wasn't true with G&Ts in a lot of the states.
I think that's wrong, though.
It
doesn't tie them in.
It doesn't buy. They don't buy into it.
They got to buy into it. They got to make the decision to do it.
Right.
I think it's wrong for East Kentucky to do that.
I agree with you entirely.
Yeah.
And then I think Big Rivers, maybe Dennis, did the same thing.
I don't know for sure.
Yes,
But the co-op will never appreciate what they're getting from that if they don't buy into it and pay for it themselves.
You don't pay, you don't.
That's right. That's right.
Another question I had on my mind, we've had some discussion of how that without KAEC
Oh, there wouldn't be.
standpoint.
There wouldn't be. There wouldn't be.
And without NRECA and the Long Range Study Committee, there would be no CFC.
That's right. That's right. And it just goes to show you got to have organization all up and down the line.
Today, it is perceived in some circles that NRECA and CFC tend to be somewhat competitive.
There's a little bit of that still there. I had the feeling it was my fault, maybe because I was involved with the NRECA Long Range Study Committee, and they knew that I was one of the blockers of making a part of NRECA, that had a part to do with some of the friction. But I was hoping that would disappear when I left, but I think
No,
maybe
it's
some of
still
it's
there.
still there. And it's staff. It's staff.
And my question is, how do you deal with that, whether it is an NRECA CFC or an East Kentucky KAC, where you have the one organization that helped the other one come into being, and now they perhaps butt heads from time to time?
The only thing that can happen is time. The only thing that's going to heal it to be time and individuals. It's got the foresight to deal around it.
And I don't
Let me give you an example of one of the problems we had here in Kentucky. You know, we had a building operation at one time here in Kentucky when we started the association. There were about 5 or 6 co-ops that were in a central building organization, separate, before we set the association up. We transferred that into the statewide at the time, and Ann Jones was running it. She was with Harrison Rural Electric as a bookkeeper at the time, and she came over to the statewide as the third employee, and she was going to manage the central building operation. And we had IBM equipment. As time went along, I could see that we needed a bigger operation, that we needed expanded, and I got the idea of setting up a central building organization. And now it's big in Missouri. And I guess we were responsible for doing it because we invested a lot of the association funds in that and took the leadership on it. East Kentucky decided they were going to do the building for their co-ops. And there was real friction there then between us and them. Who was going to do it. They could do it and subsidize it. We had to charge for it. So that created real friction.
Same thing is true with East Kentucky's credit union. They subsidize their credit union, which enables them to pay higher dividends on their deposits and so forth and so on.
Yeah, but that's foolish management, I think. They ought to come in together.
A rather specific question. Has to do with bylaws. We have 2 different points of view in this state. Should an elected official be eligible to serve on the board of a co-op? Or should there be a provision in the bylaws that would prohibit that?
I think it ought to be in the bylaws to prohibit it.
And your reason?
The reason is that if he's elected official, he's either Democrat or Republican. And then when he gets in politics, he's going to create enemies. And those enemies are going to follow him. If he's on the board, they're going to follow him to the co-op. And that'll create problems somewhere down the line, and he'll be an issue. He'll be a problem somewhere along the line if he's in politics. Because he's going to try to use the co-op, too, to his own advantage if he's on the board. And every time it works out that way.
I feel the same way. I've seen it both.
Yeah, yeah. I thought we had that in most of the bylaws.
Well, we have a mix now.
Do you?
Mhm. Matter of fact, at this moment, we have a member of the House who's on the House of Representatives who's on one of the co-op boards.
You know, when he's campaigning, he's going to say, I'm a co-op director.
And we've had a county judge.
Yeah.
And you're right, they bring the politics.
They take it right to the co-op because that's where they use the advantage. That's the leverage.
That's a good way to put it.
Yeah.
Dennis, another question?
A couple. We have had some discussion recently, Mr. Smith, about the National Farm Machinery Show. Can you kind of take us back to that initial discussion with the
I've
people
seen
of
something on that.
agriculture
I've
about
seen
that?
something on that, but I don't have much recollection of that.
We had a guy in from the College of Agriculture. I think he said it was you and him that conceived of the notion of a statewide display of farm
Yeah, I
machinery.
remember talking about that.
And he said, we started it out, and we put it, I think, in Louisville. We took it to West Kentucky. We brought it back to Central Kentucky. And then we proposed to the State Fair Board that it ought to be a national farm machinery show. And he said the origin of it was in a little corner of a tobacco warehouse up at Lexington, working the UK College of Agriculture, working with the state association. And then we proposed to the State Fair Board that they make it national, and that became the National Farm Machinery Show.
I'm pretty blank on that. I just don't remember much about it.
Yeah.
Parker?
Yeah.
I'm kind of blank on that. I really don't remember much about it. I must not have been involved in it very much.
Another question, Dennis?
At one time, of course, you were downtown Story Avenue, and you came here in the 50s.
Right.
What did you all think about? What were the factors that you evaluated, and how did you evaluate them to make the move and to move here?
Well, we were trying to plan as far ahead as our resources would let us. I think we bought 6 or 8 acres out here, as I recall at the time. This was way out in the country. And we were jammed up trying to manufacture down on Story, too crowded. And we were trying to get some room for expansion and where we could grow. And we thought this was a pretty good location at the time. And we borrowed most of the money, as I recall, from the bank for co-ops with it.
Did you maintain memberships in like the Louisville Chamber and take some activities and
Yeah.
involvement there?
Yeah, I belonged to the Louisville Chamber, belonged to the Lions Club downtown, trying to get some ties in with people there.
And I reckon fairly close involvement with the state fair.
Yeah.
Beauty contest and other things.
Yeah, Dan Baldwin was our key out there. He was state fire manager at the time. Yeah, we tried to participate in that as much as we could. We tried to get our finger in everything that would help us.
Well, that's smart.
Yeah.
What about the relationship, Mr. Smith, between the rural electric cooperatives, the Farm Bureau, the county extension agents, and the College of Agriculture in the establishment of the rural electric co-op?
We tried to maintain a good relation with the Farm Bureau. We never did get very much involved with them. But we had a good relations with them, knew the people, worked with them on various projects. County agents we didn't do much with. They left that up to the co-ops. That was the co-op level. We urged them to be involved with them.
Right.
Well, J.K., we appreciate your time.
Enjoyed it.
Appreciate what you've done.
Appreciate it. Good to be here.
Tammy, any questions from your side?
Yes. Just one. In your opinion, you were here 20-some odd years and helped start this establishment.
Yeah.
In your opinion, what are your couple of your most achievements that you're the most proud of while you're running through here?
Oh, Lord, I guess establishing the material program, because I always felt that material program was the basis for a strong statewide that gave us the assets to do the things we needed to do that we couldn't get enough money out of membership dues to do. It enables you to have a better staff. It enables you to have better facilities. You wouldn't have this building here if you were operating on dues. You wouldn't have near the staff and the caliber of staff you have if you're operating on just dues. Compare your statewide with Tennessee, for example, or some of the other states that don't have material program. You're able to expand. You've got the resources and the know-withal to do it. And I think that was one of the proudest things we did. And then our involvement with CFC. I think we did more for the co-op program through the establishment of CFC than anything has ever been happening in this program.
And then I think what you individually did, J.K., by weaving in the state association involvement with the local distribution co-ops annual meetings. That annual meeting is so essential.
Oh, yeah.
And it would not be anything like what it is today without the resources and the coordination
Couldn't
of
do
the
it.
state association.
You couldn't do it. You wouldn't have the resources to do it. If you had to do it on dues, you couldn't do it. The annual meeting is the tie to the members that each co-op just cannot let fall by the wayside. That's the real tie they have. That's the only time that they can really get to the members and tell them what they're doing and tie the members in, and bring them in. It's the greatest PR thing in the world.
And so many things that a co-op just takes for granted. We were over at Shelby the other night, and in the primary system, the speaker went down or something. Nobody could hear the person with the microphone at all. Within 30 seconds, Dennis had an auxiliary mic, a hand mic that he handed to Roy Paul of East Kentucky Power. If the state association had not been there, that meeting, the balance of it would have been virtually destroyed.
Been a failure.
And then the members get mad. They go home angry.
Yeah.
And they're upset. It really is nobody's fault, but it can be prevented.
All the little things become big problems then.
Right.
The greatest work you do is with annual meetings. No question about it. If you don't do anything else here, it's the greatest service you can provide. You always ought to have somebody on this staff that's an expert in annual meetings, that knows the procedure, that knows the MC work, that can handle the crowd, that can help the boards, help the directors and the manager with their reports, help them prepare their reports if necessary. All that's very important.
Well, Dennis fits
Some
all
managers don't even give a report. I don't know what they still do or not.
Most do.
Well, that's good. That's good.
Dennis fits all those things except for the operative word work, J.K. Now the work that word.
If he's going to
is a little
annual
sensitive.
meetings, he's working. He's working plenty. I tell
We
you.
appreciate your time, J.K.
Thank you.
Yes,
Thank you.
sir.
My main job is to be Mr. Sheets' whipping boy. Mr.
Yeah,
Smith.
that's great. That's great.
Sorry
Good to see
about being
you.
late.
That's all right. Good to see you.
Good to see you.
Good to see you with the co-op here.
Thank you.
You were the attorney at Winchester, weren't you?
Yes.
Yeah, great. Great.
Been
You were
here.
there for how long, Dan?
I was there